Are you someone who's an advocate of like building like a whole org chart, even if you're your own entrepreneur, of all the key positions and roles at the start? Was that something that you've done, or do you have certain strategies you've used to help you hire your first people?
I will say it's tough, right? Because I didn't come from a teeny weeny company, right? I came from bigger companies and all of that. So it really is a different mindset. I do think it's important to know where your hiring is going. And with the help of some business coaches who have done the exact thing that I'm doing now, which you'll see a pattern in when you look at my success, it's on the shoulders of giants. And that is one of my secrets is I invest. The number one place that I invest is in my own self and in my own education. And that's reflected definitely in the number of dollars I've spent. And that's the quickest way to get ahead. Like, I love that folks are listening to your podcast. I love that people are reading your book and all of that. And like, that's a step in that direction of keep investing in yourself, because there's nothing more important than that.
It's something that's been a theme throughout the conversation, but I found it interesting early on. You've mentioned that you've hired some, for example, we were talking about YouTube, and you've had some advice that people have given you that was not necessarily the right advice. And one of the things that I find is quite intimidating in the marketplace today, if you're looking for a coach, is there's a lot of coaches. At least it seems that way. Mind you, I am in Bali, which is like the capital of life coaches, but I'd be curious to know, where do you go and how do you find yourself being able to pick out what would be a quality coach for what you need? Are there a certain place that's ideal for people to look at, or maybe it's events that you have to go to? How do you source that?
What is really tricky about coaching is there isn't some sort of portal where everyone is reviewed and everyone. It's very fragmented, and so it is a lot of word of mouth. It is a lot of watching people's content. That's why I put out so much content, because I know that for people to take the step with me to choose me as their coach, they need to be able to trust me. And I think that the best way to do that is to have people hear you speak authentically, and they can get a bit of your style, because even if they agree with everything I say, maybe my personality doesn't match with them or whatnot, at least they get to see that. And so I think one of the things that I have been burned by several programs, and I have had great success with others. And one of the key factors is you typically want to go to the top. You want to go up as high as you can possibly afford. And that when I said I paid a lot of money, I did. And a lot of these coaches will hire other coaches to coach you, or they will be really inexpensive. But you think, oh, I'm cutting corners and all of that. And not saying that when they hire other coaches, those coaches aren't great, but you just have to understand what you're getting. And what I found is, like, when I would go to the top, so I've done a lot of like group coaching programs, because typically if you are going for someone who is really in demand, there's no way you're going to get one-on-one time with them unless you want to pay thousands and thousands of dollars per hour. And that's worked famously for me. So my thing is I've stopped cutting any sort of corners when it comes to choosing the people who are going to give me the shortcut. And I have constantly, 10x'd my investment.
That's some really good advice and reassurance for anybody who's maybe hesitant in investing in themselves, just understanding how that will pay the dividends. There isn't a magical place. I was hoping you were going to say, you just go to www.madelineapprovedcoaches.com. No? But
I should make it, right?
Actually, there's an idea in itself, but I agree with you. I think one of the best ways is to look out for the content. But on the flip side, I've also seen, because again, we talked about the core skills, your experience, HR, recruitment, talent. You have that as a base, and you've learned the marketing and sales. You've understand the power that it brings, the attention that you need to build that trust, etc. And hand in hand, you're an amazing coach. But I've seen the dark side, which is just learn the marketing and sales. Now I can paint the picture that I'm amazing, but maybe everything that I have isn't rock solid. And that's when you talk about being burned, that's probably the types of people who have just been good at marketing, sell you an expensive program, but don't deliver the results. Any words of wisdom on how to detect the bullshit?
That is such a good question, Jason, because Unfortunately, a lot of the people who come into my coaching program are ones who've already spent thousands of dollars on coaching and they've gotten totally burned. And I see what that coach has produced for them. And I say, yeah, this is not it. Because again, I come from a space, career coaching, job search coaching, which has an extremely low barrier to entry. Oh, I've done a job search. Let me help you with your job search. And anyways, so it's really, really rough. And I did invest in a program that was, this woman, she was, I would say to this day, probably the best saleswoman I've ever seen. Like, this woman was magic. You watch her, she is magnetic. You think that if you invest in her, your whole world is going to change. And I took her program, and she did not really understand instructional design. I have an instructional design background. She didn't really, every time I ask her a question, she would be like, well, that's never happened to me, so I don't know, because she's only built her business one way, and she really didn't have other experiences to pull from and all this. And I've continued to stay in her orbit, and I hope people don't try to guess who it is, because I've had quite a few coaches, so it's probably not who you're thinking of, because I very publicly talk about some of my coaches, and I appreciate them. So don't guess. But yeah, I have stayed in her orbit because I'm like, dang, her marketing emails, her presentations are still amazing. It's just once you get into the other side, she's like, all right, later. Good, nice knowing you.
It is unfortunately a very common thing. I've had my own experiences seeing people that sell that way. And again, I'm glad you've seen the silver lining, which is there's amazing sales and marketing tactics and techniques and processes you can absorb from that. But when you know what you offer is more than what you ask in return, you can use that to get the attention and to steer people into the programs that you're building, that you're putting in the love and you care for people. So I'm very happy we were able to see that, hey, it does exist. You have to be careful out there. Do your due diligence, take some risks. And one thing I do find for a lot of these programs is there's often a very generous refund policy for taking the initial leaps. And unless it's an outright scam, which you should be doing enough research to detect if that's the case, I find it's more helpful if you take a leap of faith. You buy the program. If it has a refund policy, you get to go on the other side and see what it's like. And I think that's one of the ways that I would suggest people to take more action, to try more things, and to give things a chance. Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.